If you've been playing the War Within at all, you would know that Season 1 of Mythic Plus is an incredibly hot talking point. So I wanted to give my thoughts on just where we're at after 3 weeks, talk a little bit about how I feel about things, and talk a little bit about what I'm seeing from like a community perception standpoint. Just kind of keeping this conversation going every few weeks here. And I'd imagine next week there'll be an even bigger update because as of right now, I've pretty much done all the 11s. And now we're going to start getting into 12s with this coming week of streams. I imagine it's going to be very, very difficult and it's going to be probably very low success rate. So, what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to make a separate part of the stats tab there for only the actual content that's above 12. And then we'll be able to compare that content to the content prior to it. And maybe other people can do the same thing if they're also using the spreadsheet in the future. But yeah, what I'm trying to say here is that there's a huge divide. And you may not be familiar with this and how big of a deal this is because on the beta, we talked a lot about this. And I do think, like, even though people constantly ask me how I feel about the season, I won't truly be able to give my opinions on the season until we're regularly at the point where 12s are all we need. So we're right on the precipice of that. Now, that's remarkable because that took me 3 weeks. You could say I'm behind, which I do agree that, like, I didn't get to that point very quickly, but this is good because I think probably most players are still behind, right? Like they're not in a point where they're rushing to get to this progression level and then hitting this wall. Now, why this is a good thing in my eyes is because it means that Blizzard did hit a mark where Mythic Plus, even though it does have like, infinite progression, everybody usually hits some kind of a cap. It does mean that a lot of people are taking their time getting to that cap. And I think that means that the difficulty of the lower keys is succeeding. One of the biggest things we talked about is the fact that they did that level of the squish of the key levels. And I think it worked out pretty well. One of the big things I wanted to see from it was that more people understood the dungeons better and that you wouldn't have people like failing a mechanic 7 keys in a row and then finally getting to a level where if them failing it, that now it matters, then that wouldn't happen. I don't know how big of a success this was because, we had some very, very prominent examples of it submitted to this channel or even seen on this channel where we saw the druid getting eaten by Naralax on purpose because he thought this was a tank mechanic that he needed to survive. That's clearly an indication of this guy doing it wrong multiple times, thinking he's right. Because why else would you even think that was right once, let alone multiple times? He obviously was doing it and surviving it, right? So we're looking to solve those problems with this situation. We're looking to see like people not spending hours and hours in very, very, very easy keys before they actually get to the hard stuff. And unfortunately, Blizzard kind of failed us on this way because they made zeros way, way, way too easy. They basically lied to us. I don't know why they would say this if this wasn't ever going to be true, but they said zeros were meant to be more like a 10. And I don't think anybody who's ever done a zero could ever even remotely say it's anywhere close to any Mythic Plus difficulty ever. Like, I'm not sure I would say the Mythic Zeros that we had this expansion are close to a 2. Like, I don't even think they're anywhere close to a 10. This could be partially due to the upgrading system, the gearing system, how Delves fed into all this. I'm sure it's all a factor there. But unfortunately, just because of the way the game is been designed, we're still in pretty much a similar boat here where there's a lot of people getting into keys that they simply are not ready for. And, we saw this in the video that I published on Saturday where, we basically have 4 people flaming a tank for not really understanding a fight. Like nobody understands it. All 5 people are not able to articulate what's happening on the fight very well. And this is something that you should not see at a progression key level, but you do partially because of how the game is designed really. So but from my perspective, I think this is healthy and I think it's working well outside of those, outliers that people are, struggling. I think it's good that you struggle. And I think the lower keys being harder is really, really good. Now, I've heard a lot of weird comments about like the low keys being really, really hard, and I've seen people failing them. And usually, when I see people failing them, it's because they're just really bad at their classes. Like, it's not even really the content that's that hard. And I would say, like, the biggest thing, adding challenge to the game right now is that level 7 affix. But when you see people doing like 500K overall and stuff on lower keys, or even less than that, or like tanks and healers just getting absolutely slaughtered, having no idea what they're doing, you kind of can't even really comment on the game at that point, right? Because then, like, that's just really on the players, and I don't really know how to solve that. So I have seen a lot of conversation like this, where there's like people saying like, "Oh, keys are impossible right now. It's like so hard. We have like, I don't see how I'll even get to 10 at this point." And my response to that is probably like, you should have hit this harder out of the gate. there's a lot of, especially in the first week, there's a lot of different people melding into one pot where everybody on the planet needs a two at one point. Like even the world first players of all Mythic Plus type of difficulty, they are doing a two at one point, right? So you want to be in that group. You want to be with those people. Obviously, you're not going to be with the best players in the world, but you want to be with the upper echelon of players all at the same time. And if you could get into that 10 that first week, like we did, that can really propel you forward to the point where you're kind of like ahead of the pack. So if you're in those low keys and you feel like that's a problem, then this is a way forward in the future. But, in general, I do think there's a lot of people who are confused by the hero towns. I think there's a lot of people who've come back to the expansion after a very long time. And all I could say is if you are in this boat and you're struggling in these lower keys, please consider just recording your runs and sending them to me because I can probably help you identify what the issues are. And if not, then we'll just laugh and have a good chuckle over it all. But yeah, I personally have seen, I've been helping some people that I know with some lower keys. It's been beneficial because I need the currency anyway. Anything between like 4 and 8 gives that second tier currency, which is still needed to upgrade gear. So yeah, when you go into these like fours or fives or sixes, you run into people who are just like, wow, shockingly low DPS. Like I'm talking about like 200k DPS on some packs. And I don't really know how to help somebody with that. You know what I mean? Like to me, the game has an abundance of resources. And I think it's just indicative of maybe perhaps somebody who has not really taken serious content in the past. They've not really looked at it as something they want to do, and now for some reason this expansion is making them want to do it. So between the combination of gear from delves and everything else, I think it's kind of blurring a lot of these difficulty lines. And yeah, like I said, this isn't really on Mythic Plus, but it is kind of on Blizzard, so it's an overarching topic. Now, another thing I see brought up all the time is the situation about invites. Okay. Now, I'm going to tell you right now, this is not a new topic. I don't know why it continues to be brought up. It feels to me like the World of Warcraft community just can't ever be happy about something. Like there has to be some ball of hatred towards something. And not hatred's too strong of a word, but there has to be some general malaise about the game. And then it's got like a gravitational field to it. Like once there's one thing solved, then now there's a new problem, right? Like there's always been this issue where if you're a DPS, it's hard to get into keys, both at low level and high level. And this is why people hate meta, right? And if you watch the early iterations they were doing on fixes, I was really pleased because it sounded like they were going to give buffs to certain specs that would not be popular on some weeks. And this would help you get in. Since there's no weekly affix score, you would then be able to get in on weeks where your spec was strong. And they scrapped this very quickly, but I did think that this was a good idea. So that was really the only thing I've ever seen that they've tried to offer relief to these non-meta specs. But I don't even think like this is like a high problem. The low problems that you see where, I actually saw this on Twitter. This guy posted an image where he got declined to 10 straight keys. All right. And the thing about that image is it's very misleading because it shows 7 of them just say delisted. Okay. And so it looks like you're being declined, but you're not being picked. But in reality, they just picked somebody else. He didn't press the X on your name. And I think this is a very important thing to understand here because unless it says declined, you did not get declined. Somebody else just got picked instead. And I don't know how many people fully understand this, okay? Because you tell these players to do their own key, and then they suggest that if they try to do their own key, nobody is interested in their key. Now, I don't know how true this is or not, because obviously I play a tank and I only play my main, okay? And people criticize me for this too, but I mean, again, this is a choice you made. Just like we talked about with Delves, you're choosing to play a DPS, you're choosing to do low keys, you chose, I mean, however you want to say it, but like you're stuck in this low kind of this elo hell type situation here. These were all things you could have worked around at some point, especially if you're playing a DPS spec that has a healer or a tank spec. You can continue to work around it, but you're still doing what you're doing. So at the end of the day, you made this choice, and there are some detriments and some benefits to these choices. But I don't really believe it. I don't really understand how it could be true because I think there's so many players out there in this boat that are just refusing to do their own key that one way or the other, this is the actual answer. Whether or not you listed a key and nobody signed up, I don't know what to do about that. But it's like a general idea here that isn't being understood. when I see, and this is something I see all the time about all these different Mythic Plus topics, when I see a lot of people all complaining, it really makes me just like scratch my head. Like, are you reading the thing that you then posted and seeing how many people are replying to it? Because you know how many people you need for a Mythic Plus? You only need 5. So when you got hundreds of people all saying, I can't get into a group, Blizzard needs to change something. Your answer is literally on the page right in front of you. You're staring at your own answer. You just all go play together. Like, I don't know why that's not like, you don't have to pug as a DPS alone. Like, that's not how you should only look to solve this. There's many, many, many ways to solve this. And could Blizzard do something? I think they might. Yeah, we talk a lot about this, and I think they will do a solo queue system down the road, just like with Mythic Plus, or just like with Arena, or something like that. But that'll be a video down the road if we ever get any more info. Apparently, there was some kind of like survey sent out on this topic, and I do think they will do it. I made a video on this a while ago, back in season 3 of Dragonflight, but anyway, for now, let's keep talking about this season. And I do think a lot of these problems are self-made to the point where, people are just allergic to taking solutions serious. Like they refuse to switch to tank. They refuse to group up with other people. Like just make a friend who's a tank or a healer and you're immediately going to have better success rate. It doesn't even matter, dude. Just make friends with other people and then you'll have way better like you'll be able to push easier because obviously strategically it's going to be easier, but that's not the main reason. The main reason is because you can share your keys. Now all of a sudden it's like you have more than one key. So if you're pushing to a point where you don't like the key you're getting, then you could switch to somebody else's key. This is very, very important. And this is the number one reason why like cohesive groups of 5 adequate players are always going to succeed more than 5 pugs. Because if you need a specific key and you have no hope of getting into somebody else's key, then you have no, like, there's nothing you can do about that in a pug setting, right? You can't really like reliably push up your key multiple levels and get the key you want. But if you have 5 people who all have keys, you can potentially just keep re-rolling one person's key until they get the key you actually need, and then you do that. That is really the number one factor in Mythic Plus that I don't think a lot of people understand when it comes to actually pushing past a wall that you can't get past. But anyway, I think in terms of what I've seen, obviously, again, you can criticize me for this or whatever you want to say, but like I played Blood Death Knight and Mythic Plus because it's awesome and because of all the benefits that come with it. And I would recommend everybody do it because right now I think tanks are in a great position. We talked a lot about this where they were supposed to be nerfing tanks to the point where healers were meant to be like more active on the tank. This isn't happening. This doesn't happen at all. I reacted to this heavily on the beta and it just never happened, which is really weird. I don't know how Blizzard managed to mess up their own design so bad, but I think they kind of did this in Dragonflight too. So from what I can tell, healing is harder. Things are harder, and I'm enjoying it. I really am enjoying it. The fact that it took me 3 weeks to get to this wall, and now that we're starting 12s next week, is a very, very healthy thing for me. And I feel like this is exactly how the game should go. So I think somebody said it the other day that basically like all the people who dislike the season are just the guys getting farmed. And I think, yeah, I would agree with that, to be honest. Unfortunately, I think, this added difficulty, this extra difficulty of the 7 affix, it's awful and it should be removed. But, there's some things that you can look at as bright spots on this situation because, yeah, we talked a lot about this in the past and I don't want to keep bringing it up, but like deaths are very normal in keys. But honestly, dude, like it gets to a point where, if you're getting farmed by 20 some deaths, yeah, I mean, maybe you shouldn't really be upgrading keys, like there's a line that can be drawn. And it's just going to depend too much on the difficulty for me to enjoy this type of a fix. I personally, disagree with the whole concept of it. Deaths are already punishing enough. So if you're, wanting to fix this problem, you should fix this by tuning the difficulty of the dungeons. But I don't really know how you solve this from here. And I do think Blizzard should remove this affix or at least tune it in some way downward. Like maybe just 10 seconds could be a better start. But yeah, there's many, many keys on this channel where if that affix didn't exist, we would upgrade like comfortably. But, with that many deaths, it's pretty much impossible. But yeah, one of the bright spots of it is it's encouraging people to be more conservative, more, kind of stable in how they approach the dungeon. And this works. Like you can do this up to 11. I've yet to do a 12, so we'll see. But up to 11, you can do this where you are pulling smaller. We did this very heavily in Dawnbreaker. If you guys are having trouble with Dawnbreaker, you know me. I hate this dungeon. I think it's one of the worst dungeons they've ever made. But we have found ways to work around the problems in it now. You can watch my routes on the spreadsheet and see like there is a very kind of slow and steady pace that we can take in this dungeon by taking the most conservative pulls to eliminate the potential stuff getting aggroed. And I don't know, if Blizzard did this on purpose, but if so, genius work on their part. Got to give them credit where credit is due. It eliminates all the extra accidental aggro. Like if you fight the packs the way I do, you pretty much can't aggro something by accident, and it's perfect count. So it's like, yeah, they might have done it on purpose. But I don't know. I'm really, really happy with the season so far. The difficulty's been very fun. And the fact that we're kind of like not at our progression level yet. Like, speaking of sub 12s prior to the season starting, I never would have thought that it would have taken me 3 weeks to get to that point. And I like this. I think this is really good because it feels like we're actually playing the full expansion. Like I need gear still. I'm still upgrading my gear. Like I really, really care about everything that's happening. That was another criticism I heard a lot about this season, was that the requirement is 90 of the currency. I don't know a lot about this. I don't even know when they changed this. But from what I could tell in the past, this is how it worked. It used to be 60. I believe that's the number, right? But wasn't that also the cap for the week? Like you can only get 60. So to me, this isn't actually a change. They just made it take longer to get the cap. You still have a full week of cap to upgrade or to actually craft a piece. I don't know this for sure. I never really pay attention to this kind of stuff because I really feel like gearing is relatively passive and almost kind of incidental at times. Now, that was mostly back in the day when the keys didn't have this huge spike in difficulty from 11 to 12. But yeah, I don't know. So those are my thoughts so far. I mean, I think it's a very good season. I think a lot of people are just making it harder on themselves by refusing to, actually try to solve their own problems. And I am very optimistic about what the future of the season looks like for people who are, not looking to be bleeding edge players. For me, I'm not very optimistic of it because I do think now that we've hit this 12 wall, we're probably not going to have a lot of success. I've gone on the record and say I don't expect to upgrade to 12 this season. I can see why you guys think that's foolish. I probably would say that that's foolish too now that we're going to get to that point, but I don't know. I'm really shocked. I would be really shocked to know that we had any success in those at all because, people talk about miss a turn of scythe, right? And it's like, that's on 11 and we barely upgrade it. It's like there's like 20 seconds left or something like that. So I don't know how all of a sudden on the 12 we can do it. I'd be really surprised to hear that we can do that even with more gear. So we'll see how it plays out. Stay tuned to the streams. We're going to be doing 4 days of streaming going forward, and hopefully we can see that progression. I have a lot of ideas. If for some reason we hit walls way too quick, Loki's looks like a mess right now, so that could be something to consider. But yeah, realistically, I think it's a good season, and I do think we haven't really gotten to that point yet where I would say it's going poorly. And I think a lot of people haven't even come close to getting to that point. Like they're still kind of treading water in these lower keys. So once you get to a point where you're hitting these walls and you can't progress, then it's not as fun. But for now, it's been a huge blast, and even the difficulty has been engaging. So let me know what you guys think about this. Like I said, I'm going to be doing a new stat tab on the actual stat tab, like a little segment to collect all the data for 12 and higher, so we can compare that to 11 and lower and kind of give that little bit of a dichotomy there. And hopefully Blizzard can get some feedback on this because I do think that their goals have not been met all around. So let me know what you guys are experiencing, and stay tuned because next week we'll probably have a third edition to this conversation where we talk a lot about 12s and higher and what pugging has been like at that point. So thank you for watching. If you guys are out there running low keys, especially, please make sure you press that record button, send them in. And yeah, if you guys are having trouble with anything, let me know. I'm happily here to answer any and all questions. Thank you for watching. We'll see you guys in the next one.